Hello everybody and welcome to yet another day here on LPL English. We continue on through the regular season, almost a quarter of the way through, with two more series, both in Group Ascend for you on this lovely Friday morning or Friday afternoon or Friday evening, wherever you really are here in the world. My name is Grapes, joined alongside Rooted. We're going to start things off with JD Gaming against Fun Plus Phoenix, followed up by Weibo versus IG Root. Two really fun series. I think both could be pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, two teams that are quite close in the standings regardless, and I think that looking at these two teams, to starting off, first of all, we have got a very important series up ahead, right? Two teams that are vying for a really good spot to try and push to that top four, not yet there, who have had really lackluster starts to their split, but seemingly just recently have found some success.
And just like any LPL season, always chaos, kind of just throughout the entire season. Lots of upsets. We saw Anyone's Legends get off to a bit of a slow start. We're seeing teams like Weibo get off to really hot starts. And we had a really wild ending to one of our series a couple of days ago, featuring one of our teams down here in FPX specifically, as they picked up their first win. So to get the mood all right for you guys, we're actually going to shift on over to a clip from Jackulove reacting to the end of FPX's series against Invictus Gaming.
啊，这波一个没死，这中路线没了，不会被偷一波了吧，孩子？啊，不会家没了吧，哥们儿？啊，我操，真拖住了？难道说，哎，波比有大，没事儿。啊！ 敲空了。
And we'll be seeing both of those teams later today. Maybe Jacula will be watching once again. But if you want that level of excitement, you're going to get it here with Fun Plus Phoenix, as they've made some pretty exciting moves, both on and off the Rift. But before we dive into fully this matchup that they have against JD Gaming, Rude, let's pull up the overall standings here in the LPL just so we know overall where we are at with things. Again, some teams kind of further along than others, specifically with some of the teams coming back from MSI. 14 series total are going to be played by the Group Ascend teams, and right now Top Esports and BLG lead the way.
Yeah, and very different sort of standings for the two teams that we've coming to see today as well. I mean, JDG finished regular season in third in Split 2, and then unfortunately kind of bombed out of playoffs, where FPX sort of similar sort of positions to where they are now, but had one of those really strong performances and a little bit of a show up in the playoffs where maybe we didn't expect them to necessarily. But currently both of them sat 6th and 7th with just one win on the board, just behind ALIG again on that cutoff for making it to the top 4, so they don't have to play a play-ins game and that they can make it to playoffs straight away. Obviously, as more teams play more games, these standings are going to get more and more fleshed out. But for the time being, JDG and FPX, both of them need a win on the board pretty desperately so that they don't start ending up with a really negative ratio. I mean, FPX going 1-4 is pretty dire. 1-3 is not great for JDG if they end up losing this one here. But both of them on a little bit of a hot streak coming in with just the one win. But with JDG having lost their most recent series as well, questions are sort of turning to, are these roster changes working out?
Yeah, both of these teams surely have something to prove, specifically against each other, to try to get into that upper echelon, to try to make a push for that top 4. Obviously, for a team like JDG, lots of high expectations coming in. Have not necessarily gotten there just yet, but they hoped that some of the roster changes were going to help reshift the focus of this team going into Split 3. And with that, we can take a look at what their roster now does look like. Some of the key pieces, Shun, Scout, and Pays, all remaining. I would say those were some of the bigger performers here in that last couple of splits, but fortifying their roster with Xiaoshu up in the top lane from RNG and Wink over from EDG. These were two teams in Group Nirvana, Rude, that they grabbed players from. And so far, there's been mixed results.
Yeah, and I think for the most part as well, the problem I have with JDG as a whole is that their mid lane has not nearly been as consistent in Scout as what we saw in Split number 2. I think Scout was, looking to try and challenge Knight almost as one of our premier mid laners, but this time round, it just hasn't really, in Split 3, hit that same high. And when we talk about, some of the benefits that JD have had, it's always been that trio in the middle of your screen with Jun, Scout, and Pays always hitting high highs. And I think, for the most part, Pays has been hitting pretty high highs still. And actually, these roster changes that you talked about, Grapes, bringing in Xiaozu in particular, has actually not netted them anything less than what they were seeing in previous iterations of their roster. And honestly, the fact that they've got Xiaozu, who's playing, at a serviceable level up in that top side, and honestly, for my money, not an awful player in any capacity, has been doing pretty well. It's good to see that these changes are looking good, and I'm hopeful for JDG that they can return to that former glory if Scout gets back to that level.
Yeah, just needing some more consistency from the, that mid jungle specifically. But yeah, everyone else kind of playing at that stable level. Have not been able to find too many wins though, as they just are coming off of an 0-2 loss to Top Esports. Their only win so far was a very close 3-game series against Team WE that is currently sitting at 0-5. So getting a win here against FPX would definitely boost the confidence, get them back to 500 as they move on to the rest of their first round robin. But their opponents today going to be Fun Plus Phoenix and Rude. They made a big roster change going into this series. Woo-hoo! Milky Way is back, baby. Reunited with Jachi from RNG, where he was last split, and also reunited with the FPX squad that he spent some time with last year.
Yeah, and it does feel a little bit bad that RYY gets subbed out after his, honestly pretty decent performance just a couple of days ago. But this roster move was in the works pretty early on into the season. Wasn't just going to be dependent on how last series ended up getting played. And I think that Milky Way coming back in and sort of being freed from the RNG jail is always going to be something that we're excited about. He's a jungler who is so frequently spoke about as a very good carry jungler, and I remember there was a roster a couple of years ago where he was just literally solo carrying games through playoffs into the playoff series as well. And now seeing him on a Group Ascend team with some good pieces around him, it's exciting to see Milky Way get to play once again.
You know, maybe not out of jail, maybe just on bail for this split with RNG not having to compete for 2025 Split 3, but at least for now, he has a real opportunity to prove himself. But before we really dive into Milky Way, I do want to give some credit to IYY. We have a couple of clips just showing what he was able to do in a very limited capacity with this team. Again, not necessarily expected to originally be the starter. I think they went with a bunch of different choices that ended up settling on IYY. Very, very new player, and definitely saw some of those growing pains, Rude. But I think as we go throughout the rest of the LPL season, and maybe even beyond this year specifically, this is a player that definitely showed that he had some good stuff to show, at least with this team.
And I mean, he was an LDL jungler who got bought up very last minute. So the idea that he's been able to, even in any capacity, compete with some of these Group Ascend junglers is pretty darn impressive. And you can sort of see in a couple of these clips as well that it's not just his ability to be able to smite an objective, right? Yes, it's very important for junglers, but equally that he can kind of see, and in this clip in particular, you'll spot that he knows when he can and when he can't go forward, and what the limits of he and his team actually are as a duo. I mean, Gala here has a little bit of an inting moment and maybe baits in the rest of his squad, but I think that for IYY, if that was his swan song in this or if this series was his swan song, then that's a pretty decent way to go out on.
Yeah, getting a win over an IG team that personally we were pretty excited about going into that series, of course, until they got 2-0'd, but they replaced him with someone pretty good. His name is Milky Way, and we're showing some clips from 2024 when he was on Fun Plus Phoenix last. Now, the team definitely looks very different. Only Care does remain from this organization, or from this roster, but the way that he was able to play these explosive carries, he was farming a clip basically every single week last year. This is the kind of jungler that can really elevate this FPX squad to the next level.
Yeah, and we're looking for somebody like that for FPX. It's a role that they've not necessarily had this split. I mean, last season, or last split even, Shadow was, sometimes popping off on these carry junglers, having a really solid performance, standing out. And I think that Jue as well has kind of missed that in the support role. He's not looked like the same support MVP caliber player that we were sort of looking at in split number 2, and I think that does come down to not having a proactive jungle voice, or maybe just having somebody with a little bit more experience by Jue's side to maybe hone him in, tell him what's good, when it's not good to look for these fights, when he can and can't be looking for a bit of vision maybe. That's the type of thing that Jue hasn't really been hitting hard on in split number 3, and I think that with a powerful jungler by his side, we can see not just the jungle role level up, but it will enable support as well.
I mean, if Milky was able to play some carries, be a real threat out of the jungle role, I think this FPX team has a lot of players that can play around him, specifically the solo laners in Care and Xiaoshu. If they can kind of take more of a backseat role and allow for Milky Way to really thrive and help carry that team into the late game, that I think is what makes this FPX team really excited, at least in the prospects of what their roster does currently look like. Speaking of the solo lanes though, I want to talk about a featured matchup that we have for this series, and that's actually the top laners here. This time around, Xiaoshu, a former teammate of Milky Way's, going up against now some of his former teammates, and going to go up against a player like Sheer, who has always been pretty exciting and was also a player that was on that JDG roster just a year ago.
Yeah, and you can see there that JDG, the organization that gave him his debut in the LPL, and the JDG Sheer fiasco wasn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but they were kind of hoping that Sheer would be the legacy, be the future for JDG. That didn't end up panning out. He moves over to FPX, and for all intents and purposes, hasn't had the amazing show-off, pop-off performance that maybe he was hoping for, but has never really been a real liability. Yes, he has some instances where we think maybe Sheer could have done a little bit more here, but there are equally games where, Sheer will lock in a carry. He will do exactly what he's meant to. And I think that you can see it from a little bit of these stats here as well, that Sheer feels a lot more like somebody who's going to try to take the game into his own hands. And I'm using sort of kill participation to try and demonstrate that. By the way that he's looking for side lane and map pressure, as opposed to Xiaoshu, who here, second in kill participation for top laners as well. Pretty important stat. Just says to me that he's just grouping up all the time. He is being talked to by his team, and then he's just turning up to places. He'll play your Orns, he'll play your Scions, and just turn up and be a part of the fight. Whereas Sheer seems much more likely, and there are numerous instances already where we've seen, you know, things like a Yorick be put into the side lane and Sheer hesitate to move over.
And like we hit on a couple of minutes ago while talking about the JDG roster as a whole, you know, going from a player like Ala to Xiaoshu maybe seemed a little bit up in the air, but he's actually really done a nice job of settling in. And this is the RNG roster that I feel like really surprisingly finished in the bottom 2 of Group Nirvana, ended up not actually making it into Split 3. That's why we saw sort of a diaspora with Milky Way and Jachi now over on FPX, Xiaoshu on JDG. They'll be facing off against each other. And shout out to Niket as well, who's doing his own thing down in Group Nirvana with Ninjas in Pajamas. Funny how things end up going, that a team like RNG that, you know, had their own ups and downs throughout the season kind of has seen a lot of their players go over to some of these higher level rosters.
Yeah, exactly. The reason we bring up this roster, right, it's a series between JDG and FPX. Why have we got an RNG roster? These are the Split 2 players. And the fact that 3 of them have found themselves a spot in this series alone is something that, you know, we feel is quite important to say that, you know, sometimes it is just the synergy. It is just something that isn't quite working out in the team atmosphere, and that those players individually actually have some really highly sought after skills, and that Xiaoshu for JDG, that we can see Jiachi FPX for FPX and Milky Way as well, actually make these really proactive plays, or at least hope to see proactive plays from Milky Way. It is a really good sign for those teams in Nirvana who haven't quite had the same successes.
And just having that level of consistency up in the top side, I feel like that was something that Xiaoshu was able to do on RNG pretty well, you know, allow for the rest of the team to kind of do some work. Yeah. Now that, you know, Ala is gone, having Xiaoshu come in and be a little bit more of a stable force who's just going to be more inclined to team fight is going to potentially help this JDG team in the long run. Obviously, we have not seen the results so far super clearly, but if he can be more stable and allow for the explosiveness to come through players like Ashun, like Scout, like Pays, I feel like that could be more of a winning formula here for JDG.
And I think that the thing for Xiaoshu right now is just to develop his one play style that he's getting really good at in that team fighting, stable type of top side. And then when JDG start to, you know, really succeed, if they end up having some massive successes in this split, that's their time then to maybe enable Xiaoshu a little bit of time to try and expand his champion pool and expand that playstyle into, actually, we could maybe, you know, look for a Renekton and a Camille maybe even here. Because, I mean, I say that Xiaoshu's Renekton has had some really stellar performances already this split, I will say. But making it so it's not necessarily just those teamfight top laners, but looking for something that's also potentially able to look into that side lane and offer a slightly different role to JDG in these team fights.
Yeah, and if you're JDG, going up against FPX, specifically when you talk about the top lane, maybe always a bit of a sore subject just because of the fact that Sheer was on their team last season, shared some time with Flandra, and I think a lot of people going into that season saw this 17-year-old rookie, like fresh out of solo queue seemingly out of nowhere, putting up some pretty good performances and thinking, oh, this could be like our franchise top laner, and then that ended up falling through, and now JDG are having some top lane roster shuffles of their own this season. Didn't really work out with Ala. Now they're trying out Xiaoshu, and so for Sheer, a chance to prove himself, maybe give JDG a bit of a taste of what they could have gotten. But if you're JDG, you want to make sure that, you know, you've proven to Sheer and you're proving to your fan base that you made the right choice as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for JDG as well, an organization that has had such successes, you know, in at least very recent history, right? Like, this is an organization that in 2023 was slated to go on a golden road, and all of a sudden, you know, 2024 they get you know, BLG's ascendancy happens, and I'm actually quite a fan of 2025 so far because neither organization or no organization really has looked like that one top tier team. And, you know, we had Top Esports doing really well through most regular seasons and then bombing out of playoffs in split number 2. But split 3 feels like, again, it's really anybody's game. And, you know, currently we've got Top Esports still up at the standings, but JDG could make a run. FPX could also look like a competent team and try and take some really important wins off of these top squads.
A very different FPX than what we saw even going into split number 1. Now with Jachi on the team, Milky Way here on the squad, who has brought back the silver hair, by the way, trying to recreate some of that magic that he had in 2024 with Fun Plus Phoenix. And on the other side for JDG, I mean, this is a team that did not make Worlds. just a year ago with another roster laden with superstars, maybe trying a couple of different formulas out. Of course, bringing in Pays after Ruler ends up going back to Gen G. And he's been a pretty big superstar. I think for them, Scout's been a little bit more on the inconsistent side, and we're hoping that he has a good performance here against Care. But if you're JDG, a team that does want to contend for Worlds every single year, every single split that you put together a roster, getting a win over a team like FPX should be the expectation, not something you're hoping for.
Yes, and the fact that they've made 0 internationals this year as well will be weighing on them, right? And we've had 3 LPL representatives so far at international tournaments. It's not like there's been one team that's been running their way through the whole time. The idea that JDG hasn't turned up to an international just yet does feel a little bit lackluster for the organization as well. So as you mentioned, Grapes, it's an opportunity for them to re-establish themselves as one of those top teams, taking what should be in their eyes an easier win up against FPX, because we're looking at the board of teams that we have in the LPL Ascend, and there aren't really that many, you know, freebie cashing you in kind of games. And JDG, they've already played WE, they've already had their theoretical win token given to them, and up against those stronger teams, they haven't managed to find their success. Whether or not this is peak JDG and that we can only expect them to stay languishing at the bottom of the table, or whether they can start to improve and start to really develop, is of course what we need to see.
And even if you're FPX, you're probably looking at JDG being like, hey, they have not looked very good themselves. This could be our chance to get back in the win column, especially after the positive momentum that they might have generated after 2-0ing Invictus Gaming just a couple of days ago off of that crazy finish, which ended up being that backdoor that Kara ended up finding. But a reminder that that was a 2-0. So even if they didn't end up winning that game, it would still have been 1-1. So the fact that all that was a 2-0, I think you're feeling very good if you're FPX, especially now that a player like Milky Way has come back to your team. If you're rooting for this team, this is definitely a win for them. And also when you just take a look at their future schedule upcoming, after this they have WE, they have AL, which just should be a pretty difficult opponent. But then you play JDG and WE again. This is a very good and winnable stretch here for FPX to get some momentum, to get some points into that victory column, and to try to climb those standings a little bit.
Yeah, this is the time now for them to really set themselves up with a baseline of wins in the season and hope that they can build on that for the future. Because whilst you say, yeah, they get to play, you know, WE twice, they play JDG twice, that then means that at some point in the future they're going to have the rematch versus IG. They're going to end up looking up against these top tier teams in BLG and top esports, and those games are going to look slightly less easier and slightly less winnable. So FPX have got a real job on their hands to try and take some of these wins nice and early.
Yeah, and a reminder, if you want to watch some of Invictus Gaming, they'll be playing up against Weibo in our second series of the day. But before we do that, I have to, of course, get into this best of 3 as we have begun the draft of game number 1. FPX on the blue side to start things off, and they are really targeting Shun.
Yeah, we'll try and give Milky Way as easy a route back to the start as possible. I mean, Xin Zhao currently looking like that premier jungler that they could look for, with Trundle and Poppy both banned away. Looks like a really good opener to look into. We've got Azir, we've got Talia still open in the mid lane, Gwen out of that top side as well. So, you know, I think that there's a little bit of a meme around Scout on Azir. So FPX maybe going to look for the Talia here, maybe going to look for the Xin Zhao to try and pair those up. But they've got a pretty decent couple of first picks to go into. And it looks like they are going to prioritize Milky Way in that first pick, taking these Xin Zhao early on. Does give JDG their choice of mid laners, expect that Talia to be taken, and you can maybe see a bit of an answer in that jungle role to the Xin Zhao as well being picked up.
Yeah, I think picking jungle in this first 3 for JDG going to be pretty important just because of all the champions that have already been taken off of the board. And the fact that you just want to make sure you lock that up before more bans can potentially come. The Wukong, not necessarily a big surprise as Shun has played that a lot this split and it's looked pretty good on it. And a pretty classic jungle matchup to open things up. Milky Way on the Xin Zhao should be pretty exciting as a player and on a pick that has a lot of agency here.
And then for FPX, it's about probably rounding out that top side in terms of those top laners that we typically see get blinded. Things like Renekton are pretty decent in, you know, blind pick situations. We've got already the Rumble being theorized and actually being taken away here. So for Xiaoshu on this top side, electing to go away from that Renekton pick, which we've seen pretty good successes on, but also providing that diverse damage profile between the mid lane, or the top lane rather, and the jungler. And now it's a case of what does Xia want to do, and it feels like almost a switch up of roles here for our two top laners, where we've seen Xia have really strong, solid performances on these carry style top laners, and maybe faltered a little bit more on these tanks, but he's the one defaulted to the Ornn. Xiaoshu put on a carry, put with the carry pants in his, on his feet really more than anything else.
Yeah, and this is a nice test for a player like Xiaoshu. He's played a decent amount of Renekton of Rumble this split, and it's looked good on it, but now getting this against Sheer in a position where, he should be able to have a relatively easy laning phase and try to turn that into some teamfight success. Overall, already, big AoE ultimate ability set up for JDG's top side is going to be a very important part of how this game operates as we head into that second phase of bans.
Yeah, we are just looking at double death balls at the minute, so those big hyper carry ADCs do tend to slightly increase in priority. If you can find that first kill, then start to snowball through the fight. Things like Sivir as well, we've seen pair really nicely and start to really rise in priority, so maybe we'll get to see that be picked up by Pays if he wants to take an early pick into that AD carry role. Does look like our supports are the ones getting pinched, at least by JDG, knowing that they're going to have first dibs on it. Expectation is that Wink will try to find a counter down on that bot side, but with the Rakan takeaway here does suggest that they either want to use the Braum or to get rid of it. I'd like to see FPX themselves probably ban out that Braum. It's a really solid answer to the Ornn in particular, and can also be used to stop a Weaver's Wall, stop a Call the Forge God. It's a really solid ban overall if they want to try and take that, and you can see that, for JDG, they're electing to get rid of those engage style supports, the Nautilus, your Alistair taken off the board, so they're looking to prevent Zhui from having those big engages. And when we look at the type of player and type of engages that Zhui's gone for, things like a Nico wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, especially now with the Alistar and the Nautilus taken off the board. Things like Rel, well, now it's banned away, but that alongside like a Leona, still some tankier options, but Zhui on the Nico really making a name for himself. One of the pioneers of this pick in the support position specifically throughout 2025. So we'll see if it does become an option, adding a little bit of a counter to some of the big circles of damage that JDG have set up for themselves. It's going to be Lucian for Pays to start things off in the bottom side. A little bit surprising
Braum looks
here,
good.
and it gives
Braum
Braum an option here for FPX. Maybe they got to pick it away here.
Yeah, keep Cubby happy. Take the Braum champion when it's OP. Don't take it super early on. But for FPX, what their composition currently lacks, honestly, is a little bit of that DPS. And I don't know that Ezreal gives you that exact amount. This kind of changes their composition a little bit more into being pick-focused, where you knock up one target with Xin Zhao, then flick that target with the Cilia Seismic Shove, and then you can use a couple of Ezreal spells as well to try and take down that focus in particular, which, up against this JDG roster, not necessarily the worst thing in the world. But I think that taking this Braum for themselves is a pretty big boost because it takes it away from JDG. But it also does mean that their composition is very focused on finding one target. For JDG themselves, they're not very tanky, so I think FPX could find some success. If JDG are caught out, if there is a position where they're not supposed to be, they get tagged by a Winter's Bite and taken down by Xin Zhao, that target is going to fall very quickly.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Zhui and Milky Way can do together in that specific duo. I feel like having a lot of power and giving Milky Way big opportunities to give FPX an early lead here in this game. The final pick is going to be Wink on the Nami. Has been another pretty standard pick alongside the Lucian. I feel like we haven't seen it as much. It's been a lot more of the Brahms, even some Leonas paired alongside Lucians recently, but still a pick that's going to be able to do well in the 2v2 at least. And JDG have themselves a very standard team composition, to say the least.
Yeah, for your supports, right, you use Braum to counter engage. He's a very good disengage champion. If somebody comes into you, you can just tag them and then they get stunned pretty quickly. The issue is that Nami very infrequently is in your backline. And if she's there, then she's probably done something wrong in the first place and goes down pretty quickly. So in the laning phase, this Lucian Nami should be looking to kind of run that bot side of the map, piercing lights through the minions and hopefully generating an advantage through this Lucian power. We'll say that the Lucian Nami duo itself isn't as strong as it used to be, not necessarily through to a couple of nerfs, but just because the strength of other supports with Lucian has certainly increased. I think that at the minute Talia Nami and Lucian. I think that Nami's maybe Lucian's 8th best AD carry pairing at the minute, or support pairing, just by terms of win rate. But with the Nami being locked in, it does offer some really good disengage to them as well, if we do see FPX go forward.
Yeah, actually a lot of disengage set up here for JDG, which, you know, doesn't counter a ton of hard engage for FPX, but in general, I think when a 5v5 starts out, the biggest go button for either of these teams is probably that Call of the Forge God over on Sheer's side. So I'm expecting big explosive team fights on both sides. Milky Way's re-debut with FPX against his former teammate Xiaoxiu on JDG should be an exciting one here as we kick off our day in LPL, starting in Group of 10.
Really silent in there.
We might have talked over the Gyos, or teams are just, the fans are just waiting until maybe later in the series to figure out who to root for. We are in Beijing, the home of JDG. Speaking of JDG, going for a 5-man invade to start things off. They don't have a ton of hard crowd control level 1, but can certainly issue the damage as FPX are very far forward. They're going on to Jachi at 200 HP. Now Jue could be the target. He's very out of position at this point. Has to burn a flash or something, but it looks like he should be away without just taking a little bit of his health bar.
I mean, I say fine. This is awful for their bot lane because they're going to have to recall. They're probably going to miss a lot of experience. You see Paisy just waiting. He'll W this. Yeah, so they'll quite happily take the turret shot for this. And it's going to make this bot lane duo probably even more scared than they were previously, right? This is now heal down for Jue. This is flash down for Jachi. A player on FPX who we've said has been pretty instrumental in the majority of their successes, and a really small thing as well that Wink's just done is actually pull the wave, it looks like. So all of the melee creeps are going to look to focus down one minion in particular, and you can see that's 2 minions of experience lost by Jachi. They're going to try and zone him off of the 3rd melee creep as well. Successfully done, or rather not successfully done, as he's got a little bit of XP, but even still, losing just 2 creeps of XP is really big in that bot lane matchup. It means that your level 2 timers aren't nearly as strong or nearly as early. It also means that in a Lucian Nami lane as well, you're going to be behind the curve from that get-go, and it's going to make surviving in that lane even more difficult.
Yeah, there are some 2v2s that actually can contest Lucian Nami like over the first few levels, and then it gets difficult, especially once, you know, the Lucian gets a couple of items, hits level 6 particularly. Not going to happen this time around. It's going to be fully Paze and Wink dominated, I think, from minute 1, just because of that early advantage. And that is not necessarily the best sign for FPX. Jachi already used to burn that barrier as well to just get away from some of that initial chunk. Not the best start here for your Fun Plus Phoenix bottom side.
Yeah, and I do like this from honestly a lot of our bot laners. We did start seeing this a bit more at NSI, where usually people use their combat summoners, aka the barrier, the heal, in do or die situations, but actually Jachi here just using the barrier to keep himself topped off in this laning phase, so that he can continue to stand up and farm without the threat of maybe feel like he's in lethal range.
Look at that, Scout's 900th game in the LPL, 4th all-time as we see here. Looks like he's going to have some trouble catching up with some of the people a little bit higher up because they're still active in the league as well. But shout out to him, a player that's really been a staple of the LPL in recent, you know, for a long time. I guess even for the last decade, even though of course he did originally come from that T1 background.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that that's a really important sort of benchmark as well to provide for people, just to remember those stories. And I do want to sort of highlight, as much as we've not been looking too much at that top side, that this is one of our featured matchups for this series. It is Xiaoxiu, who's recently joined this JDG roster and honestly hasn't had too awful a start, or too bad a showing at all. And he's got this Rumble now in game number 1. I mean, it's a really big pick to be taken. It was taken blind into that top lane, and he's going to have to deal with a pretty difficult laning phase up against the Ornn. But outside of that, expectation is that this Rumble is going to have some really big impact in these team fights, with the combination of Shockwave, Nami Wave, and the Cyclone as well. I expect Xiaoxiu to have some really big performances, and I think that for JDG fans in particular, they may be attributing some of their failures to some of these roster changes, and it'll be really important for Xiaoxiu to have a good showing in this game number 1 to prove that actually the problems are lying elsewhere right now.
Yeah, you know, a lot of the general consensus is that JDG, while replacing Ala and Missing with Xiaoxiu and Wink, taking players that maybe had higher status but perhaps were a little bit more on the expensive side and replacing them with, you know, pieces who they thought could be a little bit more beneficial for the team, or maybe at least just comparable overall. A little bit more of that Moneyball strategy here in Split 3. And so far, I feel like I agree with you. Like, they have not been the problems for some of the struggles that JDG have faced. It's been a lot of the same things that plagued them even into the postseason, where they did, of course, get eliminated by WE, and some of the struggles they had in the regular season as well. Scout, that's not necessarily having the best start to this split, not having the best year overall. He also needs to get a big step on things if he wants to allow JDG to succeed.
And when we look back at this game in particular, Grapes, do want to highlight that this level 6 marker for JDG is going to be really important. They've got those massive ultimates, the big circles, as we've called out time and time again. So looking at where those objective fights are going to take place, Xiaoju's just ticked over, Scout's already level 6. We've got Dragon already spawned, and those grubs coming up in a couple of minutes' time, where maybe the bot lane will be level 6 as well. This is a really important window for JDG to actually try to push an advantage, because as this game gets later, their composition does become more difficult to play. Lucian as a champion is notoriously difficult to have that same impact on as you reach the late game, and owing to his short range. The same to be said for a Rumble, for a Wukong. They can get kited and they can get punished, but it's FPX with Milky Way in this top rush who are maybe looking to strike first.
Oh, that's a
Never mind.
Rude awakening. I mean, we saw the toggle vision of they knew exactly where Milky Way was, but they didn't know until just then. That information, though, allowed for Jun to come down there and pick up the first dragon of the game for JD Gaming, which obviously a pretty good start for them. Slight gold advantage in kind of all lanes, particularly the bottom side is where we're seeing it the largest, but also shout out to Xiaoshu, who is farming up rather nicely on the bottom side now.
And as we highlighted for JDG, that it's that one item spike is where they go good, as Pei's hit by a Winter's Bite, going to get stunned up, should be able to walk it out and maybe even trade a little bit more back onto Jarchi, but you are seeing that this Ezreal Braum, not necessarily a duo that can be completely pushed over once we've had that first recall and we've reset the laning phase. The power of FPX, I do think, comes from a little bit later on as Pei's dashes forward, gets... Okay, fine. Guys, let me tell you what you can do.
Yeah, we ought to hear the analysis.
I mean, I do think that for FPX, their team fighting actually looks pretty decent between the Talia and the Ornn as well. They've got the Braum to help set up for that sort of returned disengage if we do see the Wukong go forward. And their composition does thrive more around the pick-oriented, or around the pick, let's say. If they can find one person isolated, or if they can just isolate one person in a team fight, that's where they're going to succeed.
Yeah, you throw the Braum stun onto somebody, and then Talia combo into, just a Xin Zhao just jumping onto, onto a Scout or onto a Pei's to start off a team fight. That is how FPX want to play, a little bit more one at a time. Not as much as the big AoE, just kill all 5 people at the same time that JDG have to offer, which I think makes things slightly more difficult for FPX. And when I see what they have to do in the team fights, I think at least one of Care or Jachi really has to come online and be that consistent DPS here once we get later on into this game. So my eyes are right now on to who can step up out of the two of them to become that big threat.
This is JDG's time, right? With all of these ultis up and ready, this is when we're looking to see JDG really pop off. We don't have first items yet, but the fact that FPX are able to steal away just one of those grubs for me is really big. It's a pretty important win for them, and JDG didn't get all 3 grubs. They did get the dragon down on that bot side, and I feel like this is maybe a little bit of a response to that. But for FPX, decent enough advantage that they're able to steal away 1.
Still counts on the feat of monster slaying for JDG because they got the majority of the only 3 grubs that spawn now, of course, here in the game on the Spirit Blossom patch. So one more dragon, a Rift Herald, that would give them the first of those feats of strength, which, again, not necessarily the biggest impact, but always something to take a look at, especially here in some of the more quiet early games.
You get to see there that she is able to make his way back out to safety, and already, we talk about this being a relatively quiet early game. Do want to highlight where some of those advantages are being found, despite the positive trades that we saw from Jiachi and Zhui. Actually, they are kind of very far behind with respect to that gold. Pei's is pretty much a full level up over Jiachi, as Zhaozu may be the one in trouble, or is it Zhui?
It's a full combo from that Flame Spitter, plus some Electro Harpoon. Way getting down to about 60% HP. Milky Way is going to go forward, forcing Shun to actually pop the Cyclone. That's a big cooldown that you'd be happy about burning for FPX.
I mean, I don't know that that was forced from Jun, I'll be honest. It felt like he could have just cloned away and walked out either way. Maybe the CC and the knock-up would have come through and he'd have had to flash or burn his ulti in a different way. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But for FPX, it's a big win for them. And just stymie some of those plays that JDG can look to make. I do think that Jun's ulti will be about back up in time for this dragon now spawning in 90 seconds time. And the question really is, can they hit any of those first items before this comes through? You can see Jun working towards his first item. Pei's now recalling, probably going to pick up that Essence Reaver and have a little bit of a boost there. But Weaver's wall top, still has flash.
So play on to Xiaoshu as Care unable to land the seismic jump. They burn the flash off of the Rumble, which in general is going to be pretty beneficial, but you do use a couple of combat spells to try to make that happen.
Yeah, so a free timer there for Care. He's going to go back to base TP down to that bot side, and he burns the flash from the Rumble. That's something that we might look to see JDG sort of revisit and try to even up the score on. But even at this stage in the game, trying to take down an Ornn can be quite tricky, especially with all of the magic resistance that's being built up. You get to see Pei's doing a little bit of dancing here, dodging out on various skill shots, but with the Ezreal having hit that Sheen and Tier power spike, he's quite happy to sit back, relax, and chill for a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of dragons as well, waiting for that Trinity Force to come through.
Nice Issue calling for Pei. That's what you want to do in the Lucian Nami lane. Once you get to that first complete item, once you hit level 6, just try to get mid lane priority right around when the time that these major objectives spawn. Speaking of 20 seconds until that Infernal is available, but FPX actually going to have a decent amount of time to try to reset things. They're going to send the True Shot Barrage out, try to get some mid lane priority of their own as Milky Way already trying to clear some vision out of the river that has been controlled by JD Gaming over the last minute or so.
Yes, those small advantages that we're talking about. Rumble has hit Leandri's. Xiaozu's walking down to this dragon. Jun's ulti is about to come back up off cooldown. And the first item for Pei is being completed. It's the only one on his team. Aside, it's Milky Way on the flip side, who's got that Sundered Sky already picked up.
Milky Way flashes in and knocks away 4 with the Crescent Guard, but he went a little bit too prematurely. It's going to be the equalizer to burn him down as the newest jungler for FPX has a rude awakening in his return. It's first blood over to JDG as they should control the Drake.
And that's going to be the dragon here picked up for JDG, and maybe some foreshadowing for things to come for FPX here. Very desynced on this engage here. Milky Way goes in with not really any follow-up. The Braum not able to do too much. The Ornn, Call the Forge God, was a little bit late, and now Xiaozu face takes Care.
Yeah, he gets exhausted as well. Remember, they burned that flash at the top lane just a couple of minutes ago. The Glacial Fissure going to slow Xiaoshu down. Care going to try to get something back and will with that Unraveled Earth. So overall, making it a 1-for-1, but JDG overall still controlling the map by getting ahead on the objective front.
Yeah, nice little shutdown as well for Care. There'd been a little bit of a build-up of farm for Xiaozu, which I guess meant that he was worthy of the shutdown, and in owing to that and getting the first kill of this game, it pretty much evens up that gold across the board here. Not really anything to be said on either side. But I do want to highlight this here. Milky Way decides to go in, thinks that he's got a good angle, and does get, a 4-man sweeps, completely separates JDG. Unfortunately, separates them all to the back, and there's nobody that can really get through. She has called the Forge God is very late, and by the time that he comes through, the Xin Zhao's already dead. There's nobody there left to follow up, and I think that FPX, some of those teething pains that we are maybe expecting with a jungle change in a first competitive match.
And Milky Way, his eyes got wide. He saw 4 members grouped up. I could do something cool with my ultimate around this dragon, but yeah. I think the goal was to maybe try to insect Shun into the enemy team, which honestly, even if that was the plan, I feel like if it was successful, it might have actually been counterproductive. So for Milky Way, maybe just having those eyes grow a little bit too much, be a little bit too anxious to go for a play when maybe staying put would have been the better option.
And to once again take stock of our solo laners as maybe more of an area that we're interested in for this series in particular, saying that Scout needs to have a pretty big performance versus Care, one of our weaker mid laners in Ascend. In the laning phase individually, had about a 20 CS lead. That gold, though, is just because of that gold lead, or the kill that Care achieved, has pretty much evened up. But Scout in the lane, he's a little bit ahead in experience, a little bit ahead in CS as well, so pretty good opening for Scout. For Xiaozu as well, he got a kill in that team fight, so he's a little bit up on gold, but actually it is that top lane Sheer that's doing very, very well for FPX in this Ornn versus Rumble.
So for now, things kind of more on the even front in terms of gold with this Herald spawning in 10 seconds. You can now see both teams focusing their attention towards that side of the map. Milky Way dashing forward, forcing a heal out of pace. Nice flash away for the Lucian to get away from that Glacial Fissure, and now it can issue out some counter damage with the culling. Another set of summoner spells as Care had to burn his flash, so overall FPX burn a couple of sums, burn a lot of ultimates, but it's going to get them priority on the Herald for now.
They still have Wave, Shockwave, and that Equalizer, so if they want to contest this, they've got some big ultimates to be able to do so. We ain't going to be able to sustain up with that ebb and flow. They've got a little bit of vision on it as well now with that ward that Care's walking over. Xiaozu in the river here. Equalizer could be massive.
Scout, blast cone's over. He's stuck in the pit right now, but he's okay with that at this point. Shockwave lands on a Milky Way. They're gonna try to just focus down the Herald, and Milky Way should smite it away. Pays down to 400 HP. He dashes away, and Xiaoshu's overheated. Shun looking for a little bit more damage onto Jue. Dashing forward, one more crushing blow will seal the fate of Jue. It's a 1-for-0 overall for JDG, but already FPX controlling that Rift Herald. They have themselves the eye in Milky Way's hands, and they'll send themselves back to base overall happy with how things went.
A very strange skirmish here, but it's FPX who come out with that Herald objective. They may lose out on this tier 1 turret in the mid lane, though. You can see Jun fishing for Jiaqi.
Forcing a flash. You're going to take that. A lot of mid lane damage, too.
Yeah, they take the turret in the mid lane as well, so I think overall this is very favourable for JDG. She are not quite able to get in time to stop that play from happening. Now it's a case of reset, get back out onto the map. We've got Dragon in 1 minute. These neutral objectives are not slowing down, and JDG with 2 Drakes already to the good, they're going to want to try and extend that, push themselves to soul point, put a lot of pressure on FPX early. But I'm concerned that if they aren't taking those resets now, that they're not going to be able to get there in time with all of those items and set up adequate vision. A reminder that FPX's composition thrives when people are face checking. They've got really good pick, really good potential to take down one target very quickly. And if they can do that by having set up early on at these objectives, then that's a pretty good way for them to try and find a way back into this match.
Yeah, got to get to these objectives first, and so far they have done so around this eventual Chemtech that is spawning in 20 seconds time. But JDG now starting to deploy. Xiaoshu's still stuck at the top lane. I don't think he's going to have his teleport available until after the dragon has spawned, unless there's a bit of a visual bug on my screen. I'm looking very closely. I think
going to be tight.
Spell up.
Yeah. He'll go back to base now. He'll probably have the TP in once he's channeled his base and bought his item. So a case of who can push mid, and instead it actually looks like Xiaozu doesn't really want the item. He's going to go to top side, finish off that tier 1 turret, and then maybe look to TP in afterwards.
Ooh, Care going forward with the Weaver's Wall. But all of JDG have the ability to actually just dash back out of things here. With that time being spent, though, Xiaoshu is able to claim the tier 1 on the top side. And JDG now gathering mid lane priority. They're going to send Xiaoshu back to base. He has to teleport now. Going to send it into mid lane as FPX started up this dragon. Waiting for JDG. The question is, do they want to fully go for this engage? Carry chewing out a decent amount of hook on his Shun. And Xiaoshu has now arrived. The dragon's at 5,000 HP. Shun going to try to get in there to secure a soul point for his team. Or just start the fight in its own right. Sheer with the Call of the Forge God lands it onto Paze, forcing him away. And that means that FPX will claim the Drake, and with the Scuttle Crab, be able to walk away with that extra movement speed and get themselves that objective for basically nothing.
And you can see that the fact that FPX are set up first is really powerful for them. It means that they can just use Call the Forge God to zone away those carries, make it so that Pace can never really get into the fight. And I will say as well that one of these drawbacks that JDG are going to run into is that they don't really have anybody to send forward into that team fight. Right, Jun, if he goes in, he's going solo, so he's just going to get melted. If Xiaozu walks forward, he's going to be in a bit of trouble as well on this turret.
Does not hit that additional wind becomes lightning, but a huge chunk of damage comes through from Care. And that means that he will pick up his second kill of the game. And Xiaoshu will die once more. That should be the mid-tier or bot tier 1 also going down.
There is going to be some chip damage on this top tier 2, same for the mid lane tier 2 as well, so it's not without its own consequence, but for the time being, it's a good play for FPX to secure themselves one turret, secure themselves a kill as well, and bully this side lane of JDG. Xiaozu there sticking around just a little bit too long, maybe expecting that the rest of the team would have gone back to base, but I don't think that that's a bad death necessarily by the Rumble. It's an injection into Care, an injection into that legacy mid laner, the franchise mid laner of FPX, something that they've tried to rally behind in seasons gone by, so it's now about whether or not Care can pay that forward in the future team fights.
Yeah, the only member from FPX of 2024 that kept around for 2025. Obviously, Milky Way was a part of that team initially, but now rejoining the fray, I feel like you can't necessarily consider him still a mainstay of this roster. It really has been Care, who even came through, I believe, their academy system a couple of years ago. And whenever we talked about one of these backline carries, Care or Jachi, really trying to get a lead, that would really help FPX once we get to some of these later stages. Care has done that and has to now be the one dishing out consistent damage. We saw some of it in those Dragon fights, but it has to continue to happen here if FPX do want to win full-on 5v5s instead of just being that pick comp that we have kind of discussed early on.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's about JDG seeing if they can maybe stymie a little bit of those efforts and pace there. I don't know if that was a misclick trying to hit that ward and hitting the Atacon instead, but it means that that ward is going to at least stick around for a little bit longer and actually give Jouet a way into this as the Atacon helping scout farm these minions a little bit. We love the tether range on Atacon.
It's so long, so much further compared to any of the other objectives. Like if you were Syndra and able to like pick it up, you'd be able to. There'd be some fun like Vandroid content that you'd be able to pull. If like, how far can we take the Atacon? But
it would just be the enemy's base, which is the like. We can intuit how far that one would be able to go.
You queue up with your friends for one for all, and then you just try to. That's just your goal the entire time.
Oh,
true. Like, that'd be really fun.
I think that'd be too easy, to be honest. Like 5 Syndra Ws, I'm taking that thing to ARAM. You know, like there's no limits on where I can take that. You did see how quickly on screen there, though, that Milky Way did get his ulti force. I'm surprised that this doesn't mean that JDG are going to look for a fight around the Atacon, but it does look like they're familiar with these TP timings. You can see that Sheer has teleport available where Xiaozu did not, and with this Rumble being up on that top side, it means that if JDG look for a fight around the Atacon, that actually they don't have the ability to contest or to play it as a 5 versus 5 without sacrificing quite a bit from Xiaozu, who now does have that Bloodletter's Curse. And I do want to talk about this item a little bit as well. It's an item that reduces the MR. It's effectively a Black Cleaver, but for magic for magic champions. And much like with the Black Cleaver, you're always looking to see who else on the team can benefit from this. And importantly, in this game in particular, Scout can do some real work if there are people who've had their magic resistance drained.
And not only that, he pays, you know, with the Nami E onto him, those auto attacks maybe hit a little bit more too. So kind of a smaller reason as to picking up this Bloodletter's Curse, but overall an item that really has risen in priority, specifically on a champion like the Rumble, and just a little bit of that extra synergy that it can provide to JDG, specifically when they are fully grouped up. Speaking of grouping up, I'm going to expect both of these teams to do that in the next 30 seconds or so, as another Dragon has spawned. Another opportunity for JDG to claim Soul Point. You remember last time FPX were the ones to get to the pit first, and their composition thrives when that happens. Not so lucky this time, as JDG right now controlling the river.
Yeah, and for me at least, it's really tricky for FPX to walk into contest this. The reason that their first fight went or the last fight went well, was because they were able to get into the river early on, and they were able to find this objective setup. But they're waiting to do this until 1 second on the Dragon spawn, and I wasn't expecting it to be as easy as it is. But with Xiaozu on that top side, it's meaning that Sheer making his way down early can actually help out the squad, and they've already started up this Dragon. So again, JDG should find it difficult to walk in here without some unique flank angles.
That's FPX for quickly taking control as Dragon's down to 5,000 HP. Seismic Shove does not land on the Xiaoshu as Care has a good angle to dish out a lot of damage. The Weaver's Wall is going to come out, actually really separate everybody on JDG. The Call of Board God only finding the clone, but that's enough for the Dragon to be secured by Milky Way once again. But the Equalizer is slowing the front line up. In goes Shun with a Cyclone, and this Tidal Wave will knock up 3. But everybody on FPX should still be able to get away. Jachi wanting to make sure he can try to save his flash a little bit and issue out some more poke. Finally, we'll use that Arcane Shift over the wall as FPX once again do a nice job securing the Dragon.
Yeah, and it's JDG that can't walk in. They don't have a tank, they don't have a front line to just absorb or to really find any engage at all. A Tidal Wave goes down, there's an Equalizer for some soft CC as well, but JDG unable to find a fight. Now though, without that Call the Forge God, without the Weaver's Wall and the Glacial Fissure, JDG feel like they can start this Atacon up, but again, we saw this back at the start of Season 25, where if you start the Atacon, you pretty much lose it if the enemy team choose to contest, and that's a sacrifice once again made by JDG, where they tried to use a little bit of their tempo to start an objective instead of pushing for some turrets in that bot lane, and they don't get anything for it.
They do burn the TP of Sheer. If you want to count that as a win, potentially. I feel like Sheer will be in the team fights kind of regardless, so we'll see how big of an impact that really is, but a small victory for them. Another reason why it's difficult for JDG to start up that Otacon, take a look at the runes, the keystone runes on the bottom half of your screen. No Summoner Spellbook for Wink. You have to go the Airy to try to help Paze in the 2v2, but that means an extra smite was available here as Jway was able to pick it up with the Summoner Spellbook, so just makes it a little bit harder to secure it, especially in a 50-50 scenario.
Yeah, contesting there for FPX actually quite easy, as you highlighted with that Spellbook, but for JDG, they do finally end up making that play for the tier 1 turret down on the bot side. Scout able to whittle away at that health pool and actually find himself now a second turret as Jun top side.
Oh, Shun. He clears out the entire wave of the cycle and forces Care to flash in a bad spot. And here is Paze. Eats a big chunk. Weaver's Wall not going to be used in time as Paze finally gets on the board himself.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any angle that you can take that wall and expect to get out to safety. A couple of Lucian autos and you are just going to fall. But that's a really big win for JDG, and honestly might be the thing that really starts to establish them as the ascendants in this game. The amount of gold and the amount of funneling that FPX has put into this mid laner was massive, right? He's the only person with kills on their team, and he got all of the gold, and for him to pay it back by dying in a side lane like that is really detrimental. So JDG, now they can look to make a bit of a proactive play. There's 10 seconds on Care before he respawns, and he will come back out onto the map with a teleport. It's whether or not FPX can get in. Remember, it's much more difficult for this pick comp to walk forward than it is when they're already set up.
He didn't actually use the Weaver's Wall unless it's a visual bug, so that should be available for him to get into things. Call the Forge God comes out. Scout was separated, but he instead goes for the other side of things. Sheer, maybe not finding a single target with that ability as a Tidal Wave combined with the Equalizer. It's chunking Care down to 40% HP. Shockwave lands on a 3 from Scout, and now the slaughter could potentially commence. Shun claims the Otacon. And now Jachi is the healthiest member, but he's the farthest forward. He gets dashed on by Shun. Now a 5v4 has opened up, and Jachi has to flash away. Sheer now taking the brunt of the damage, and he's going to have to use the shielding charge to try to escape, but in goes Scout. He flashes forward, gets a double kill, and all of FPX are down. An ace picked up as JDG now control the Rift.
And as soon as they can get in, JDG slaughter FPX. It's clinical down in the bot lane, and honestly, we were saying this season that Scout had been lackluster. This one fight from the JDG mid laner is enough to set apart him from the rest of that grouping once again. A mammoth performance from him down on the bot side, as he certainly puts FPX in the dirt. They take the tier 3 turret as well as the 6 turrets before that. But I do want you to keep your eyes on Scout. Look at how unthreatened he is throughout all of this. There's this constant 50-50 potential between the junglers, as Milky Way staying to maybe try and flip for the Atacon. But look at where Scout's ball is this whole time. Jachi knows he can't walk up to this, so he's backing away. The frontliners know that they have to walk in to try and buy space for this steal. But as soon as they do that, Scout's ball just tears them apart.
And shout out to Xiaoshu as well. That Equalizer slowing down a lot of FPX, giving Scout the opportunity to dish out that extra poke damage very quietly, having a good team fight in his own right. But as you say, Rude, real hero of this one being Scout, able to get himself 3 kills out of this fight. And overall, setting JDG up for immense success. They now have an over 7,000 gold lead, and a Baron not even taken. As now FPX look a little bit more desperate. Scout, as we were praising him, now gets caught out, and Milky Way will shut him down. No mid laner this time for JDG to win this team fight, as Fun plus Phoenix can now make their way towards what could be their 3rd Chemtech Drake of the game.
Yeah, and it's Care, just as we criticized him for being caught on a side lane in top lane. Now it's about how well can FPX hold this choke. Making JDG walk in shouldn't be easy.
Yeah, Sheer trying to box out everybody on JDG. Shun unable to ever get into the pit. They knock up Paze. Milky Way with a 3-talent strike, but he goes a little bit too far, and Paze is able to take him down. 2 kills go in the hands of JD Gaming, and they could look for more, with Shun looking very aggressively, but they instead decide to turn their sights towards the Baron.
Yeah, they'll take the win where they can get it there. FPX reaching a little too far forward. The second instance where we've seen Milky Way actually get a bit too big for his britches, and It cost FPX big time. They go forward, a flash engage onto FaZe, but he's got Summoner's Barrier ready. He's got all of the support from Wink there as well. And it's just too close to the sun for Milky Way, as the next thing is that JDG secure themselves a one fight around that dragon, secure themselves a Baron as well.
Oh!
The timing looked good, but Jun knows, he knows his smites. He's got it.
I was like, no way, right? But, okay.
I was thinking, should I say that they've secured it before they secure it? As I see this Ezreal ulti wind up, I was like, no, I'm going to have faith.
Well timed by Jachi. You know, we can give him credit there, but, you know, Sean doing his due diligence, knowing there's a full global, and pressing Smite at the right time. It feels like Milky Way in these fights, Crude, doesn't go in when there are good opportunities to go in, and then maybe a little bit too aggressive in other moments like this.
Yeah, and Sheer, unfortunately, with a bit of a blunder there, he flashes in. I don't think he expected his pillar to still be there, but he really short stops his E. Instead of knocking him up on the knuckle of the wall into the mid lane, he ends up knocking up on the little pillar that he put previously, and he's by no means in range to knock up FaZe, and that layering of CC wasn't quite available. Milky Way.
Very aggressive with that empowered blast cone, knocking up FaZe. There goes a huge combo, and Care gets a rack in his back pocket. Another nice pick from FPX. That's what their composition likes to do, and they have stymied the Baron push for now.
And FaZe here has flash, so just complete disrespect for the follow-up that FPX have. The one thing that this FPX composition will do is pick you. You get hit by one piece of CC, they've got plenty to follow up with, and honestly, that's very disrespectful from the JDG mid laner, costing his team out on what is probably going to be inhibitors and what would have been their likely push toward the end of this game.
The Scout's gotten picked once, FaZe got picked once, everybody gets one, guys. Can't happen again, as this game should be in the process of being closed out, but as items start to get picked up, Jachi's now at his third, the ornaments now really coming to play a big role as Sheer has hit level 15. The gold lead will start to matter less and less as this game goes on, and it comes down to that singular execution. The next time a pick is had onto either Scout or FaZe route, that could mean either the Soul or another Baron as soon as it respawns.
Yeah, exactly. So if they are continuing to find these picks, and it seems like just at the random clutch moments, FPX may be starting to set up, and we've seen from them in their 2-0 versus IG that there is an element of creativity to this roster, that they can find those fringe situations where maybe other teams wouldn't look for it as FaZe walks forward.
Oh my god, Care almost getting 100 to 0'd by that culling. And that can show what this Lucian still can do at this point in the game. FaZe with an Infinity Edge as his fourth item. Very powerful in his own right. But the Baron buff is available for just one more wave. Don't think JDG will be able to use it to break open an inhib unless they are able to do it on this final push. The time is ticking, and FPX do have an opportunity to respond.
True Shot Barrage immediately healed up here by Wink. You can see the power of this Nami in the late game, just whistling away some of that poke. FaZe is already back to full HP. They aren't able to take the turret. It will stand tall and start to slowly regenerate that HP. A reminder that JDG do have an open inhibitor down on that bot side that they could focus if they wanted to. But that bot wave is in a good position to help them out. When you look at the engages on both of these sides, it's pretty tricky for either side to find that big one.
I'll let you do that! That's a Shun Scout combo! Shockwave landing onto Jachi, taking him down instantly, and Sheer's the next target, already 2 for nothing, and that might be it. JDG find a perfect engage as they take 2 down and 2 inhibitors.
We love a good caster curse. It's tricky to find an engage. Well, we found the one way that we can. FaZe though. Flash.
He's going to get engaged on too, but Milky with the Crescent Guard going to keep himself alive for a little bit. Not enough though, as FaZe jumps into the Crescent Guard and ends up picking up the 3rd kill of this extended fight. 3 for nothing now. It's going to have to just be Care and Jue. Not much hope in the world unless these waves can be cleared with these. Wink eats up a ton of tower shots now with the flash away. Should be able to survive. But with Jachi spawning in 10, JDG do not want to risk going for a crazy attempt to end.
Okay, the game doesn't end grapes, but it's pretty much won from here for JDG. They have a 10k gold lead, and more importantly, their presence on the map just went up exponentially. They secured 2 inhibitors, and there's an open inhibitor in that top side as well. They should just be able to find that top inhibitor, use those triple waves of super minions to push into the base and thwart FPX's attempt at a comeback here. I like the effort from Milky Way to try and get onto FaZe as he dashes forward, but fortunately this time around, Lucian, with that flash available, he was able to get back out to safety and, you know, used his flash better than we saw from him previously, as FPX attempting to try and take this crab. Or Umbral not the fastest duo at this, and thankfully Care is there. So is he maybe fighting?
Yeah. He's doing a lot of damage still, as he is getting close to that 5th and final item. Could be a Guardian Angel, could be a Bloodthirster, it could be a number of things at this point. Regardless, it seems that this Lucian is very strong at this point. With the Baron spawning at 45, they might have tried to cut out Scout, but he uses a Shockwave really nicely to stall out Care and wait for the rest of his team to arrive. He gets knocked up though by the steering charge. Milky Way gonna try to chase him down, but Scout's gonna be able to live with the help of the healing from Wink and keep himself alive. And he waits for the rest of his team to respond. Already 2 for nothing. Jacci has to flash away, and in comes Xiaoshu, burning FPX to a crisp. And Care goes down, Jacci goes forward to try to get one back, but it will not happen. FaZe will live with 50 HP, and JDG will control game 1 of this best of 3.
A very meticulous game number 1 from JDG, and one that they win deservingly here. It looks really good for FPX for about 10-15 minutes of this, but playing from that gold deficit and the one chance that they had around that Atacon on that bot side didn't quite go their way, and it felt like it was this building eminent pressure that was inevitable for JDG. The second that team fight actually happened and the second they managed to get into a 5 versus 5, it all crumbled for FPX, and JDG snowballed. They took the game back by the horns and they managed to find themselves this game 1.
And taking advantage not necessarily of a big team fight that fully broke the game open until very later on. It was a lot of getting farm advantages, a lot of making sure that tower plates were able to be secured. Just the early game kind of led into a strong late game for this team. And that is a good sign here for JDG, as they're just coming off of, again, a pretty tough start to the regular season. They have come out firing and didn't really show that many flaws other than a couple of players getting picked off at the wrong times here in this first game.
Yeah, I mean, uncharacteristically almost. It's FaZe who's hesitant to use a flash or getting caught out a little bit too frequently. And I do think that, we highlighted at the top of this series that Scout hadn't been performing as well as we'd have needed him to. In this game, had a really standout performance on the Orianna. Care as well, I will say, on the flip side. Got a load of kills on this Talia and actually ended up finding those picks using the Weaver's Wall to find FaZe significant amount of times, which is pretty important. And, we can see these highlight players from this mid lane pool actually start to step up. Unfortunately, though, for FPX, not quite doing enough, and I think that there are still some very clear teething problems between Milky Way and the rest of FPX, right? There were definitely a couple of engages where he's gone just a little bit too close, and he maybe sees an angle that's not quite there that might have cost them a little bit too much in this game.
Yeah, coordination issues that need to be fixed, and obviously the first game that we are seeing with this roster of 5 play together on a LPL stage at the very least. Probably some scrims mixed in there, obviously. But for FPX, it's about finding that balance, finding how this group of 5 can work together. Because, again, we're pretty excited about all 5 of these players individually. We've seen each of them have good splits, whether it was Milky Way last year, Jway just this past split, even somebody like Sheer that has had his highs in a lot of these various couple of seasons that he's been a part of. But waiting for them to all kind of merge together is the next step for this FPX team as we take a look at the gold graphs and all the like, as FaZe did a lot of damage here in this game.
Yeah, I mean, he's got more damage there, almost doubling Jacci for the AD carries, which is really, really impressive, especially versus a poke champion like the Ezreal. And when you can see that Jacci has 38% of his team's damage and FaZe is still doing that quantifiable number more, is equally, something that you should honestly be quite scared of as FPX. And for JDG as well, this is kind of why FaZe has been one of those consistent players, or why we highlight him as somebody to be excited by, because so frequently he's able to pump out these massive numbers and be this massive threat in the game.
Take a look at some of the highlights here. A couple of pretty bad mistakes from Care. He had some big catches himself, but also got caught out a number of times that resulted in these big objectives going down. This was the fight that really broke things open, and again, Scout deserves a lot of credit here, although he was very aggressive with the positioning, and that's something that we have seen repeatedly. This time it did not end up getting punished, but always something to keep an eye on when it comes to how JDG end up playing.
Yeah, and as soon as Scout's able to step forward there. That tension around the choke point, around that knuckle, is really important. Because the second the FPX go either one way or the other, it either opens up for the Orianna to get a massive flank angle and a massive shockwave, or it opens up for the rest of JDG to walk in and gain access to the FPX backline if they go for Scout. So it's, just that tension, really well managed, I will say, by the mid laner of JDG. And yes, he gets caught out here, but I will say the fight around the top side as well, where it looks like he's caught, but he uses flash, he uses Zhonya's, he baits in the rest of FPX. It does really good work for JDG. So overall, not too sad about how they performed here. And you can see, I want you to point out that Sheer in this game, right? This knock-up, not quite on the range of the pillar. So he can't get that catch, can't continue that CC onto Pays.
We know Sheer more for his carry champions, obviously. So maybe the Orin, a little bit out of his comfort zone, had to pick it as a response to the Rumble. But that is no excuse. Obviously, you need to see better out of him. One of FPX's franchise players at this point, somebody that JDG ended up dropping going into the offseason of 2024. And now they're his counterpart in Jiaxu. Had himself a pretty good game as well. MVP candidates, I think Pays makes a lot of sense, but really everybody did pretty well on JDG's side.
Oh, okay. We didn't get to see the top of this, where Scout's flashing forward into a seismic shove, but you can see like he's baited all of FPX in here. Double bubble as well from Wink actually buys a lot of time and probably keeps Scout alive. And you can just see that Pays doing an absolute boatload of damage, and despite Jiaqi's best efforts, and Ezreal not quite able to solo carry in the same vein.
Yeah, and that was another thing that we talked about compositionally speaking. Not a full 1v9 threat on FPX's side. I feel like Jiaqi has been able to play things like the Kai'Sa very, very well, maybe saving it for a little bit later on in this series if you are in that true Fearless format. But I'd love to see either him or Care, or kind of anyone. I feel like there was not a full guy that we could like rely on to be that super hard carry on FPX's side. It was a lot of poke, a lot of pick, as you said. But when it came down to a full team fight, obviously JDG had the advantage, both in terms of the players on the Rift and the champions that they were handling.
Yeah, so it's a pretty tricky position for FPX to have found themselves in, and especially when they're not set up at these plays, it really does mean that when JDG can walk forward, their life becomes a ton easier. You are quite right, though. Probably going to be looking at a Pays MVP here. I'd give nods to the support as well. I do think that Wink had a honestly very, very solid game. But on the Nami, it's really tricky to try and earn those MVPs unless you are multiple triple bubbles in a fight,
Oh, Sean getting the nod here. I feel like makes a lot of sense. Again, very well-rounded victory. Shun caused a lot of those engages, which allowed, for Pays to get active. So, we'll give him some credit there.
Yeah, and as well, found that flash engage at the end. That was the really important big ticket winner.
Yeah, so congratulations to JDG. They have won their first game of the day. However, still a best of 3. FPX gonna have that side select, have an opportunity to bounce back for us. That decider here in this first series of the day here on LPL English. Well, if you'd like to support LPL English, consider becoming a coffee member. You could take, it's the best way to support the LPL English project, since the vast majority of your contributions will go directly to the show as opposed to a Twitch or YouTube subscription. A lot of the initial payments go into upgrading the broadcast in this fabulous new package that you see right here, but a huge bulk of it also pays on-air talent and content creators. Subscribe to the coffee. It is linked in our chat below to unlock perks like early access to content and the ability to ask interview questions for our unique on-site interviews. Once again, JDG taking game number 1 of this series over FPX. We'll see who is able to run away with this next one after this. Welcome back, everybody, to LPL English, where we just saw our first game of our first series. JDG getting the win over Fun Plus Phoenix in Group Ascend. So we saw some real professional-looking gameplay. But if you want to play like the pros in your own solo queue games, take the opportunity to learn directly from them. Whatever your rank is, the best way to start climbing now is to schedule a coaching session at prodiff.gg. You'll work one-on-one with an active or recent player in either the NACL, ERLs, and even the LTA, who will teach you how to play like a pro. You can get personalized coaching from those professional players today at prodiff.gg, and you can use code LPL10 at checkout to save 10% and support the LPL English broadcast. Some fun players, Rude, that we've had the privilege of covering actually over the years that are actually available on prodiff. And as we go throughout this partnership here on LPL English, we're going to get a chance to hear from some of them personally, either on the desk in live segments or also via video. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and also use that code if you want some additional coaching.
Sounds like a pretty good deal, if I do say so myself, Grapes. Certainly something to be considering. As hard stuck myself, it's certainly something to put into my mind. As you know, we're looking a little bit more back toward the series now, with JDG taking this game number one. Certainly non-hard stuck performance by them, as they really honed in on what their composition was going to do well. And I think it took them a little bit of time to figure out what it was that FPX wanted to do. And once they'd realized that actually we can't let them to these objectives first, they'd then started pushing themselves forward and managed to come away with a team fight win. So I think that JDG sit themselves in a pretty good position going into this game number two. But I think that FPX themselves will realize that actually we need to do a little bit more with what we've picked up for ourselves. That in particular, that Ezreal lock that they took for themselves didn't give Jarchi the full range that he needed in that game.
I actually did like the opening rotation of the draft for Fun Plus Phoenix. When they had the orange Xin Zhao Talia, I was like, okay, this is a very solid rotation. You get a lot of really powerful picks. But the way that things unfolded afterwards didn't really create a super conducive environment for success in their own right. Locking the Braum kind of as a ban in a way, because they felt like they had to make sure that JDG weren't playing it, meant that there was no primary go button, and then the Ezreal that was also locked in meant that there was not like a consistent full 1v9 damage threat on the team. And so needing to remedy a little bit of that, whether it's in the first phase or the second if you're FPX.
I wouldn't be surprised now if we see a bot lane pairing get picked up a little bit earlier on. We saw that the support bans were left till second phase. And if that happens again in this draft, then we could see one of these situations where the supports aren't feeling necessarily comfortable. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something get picked up a little bit earlier on. Maybe it is going to just be that Rel, that Nautilus, or the Alistair combo getting picked up, and we sort of see that trade of one of those big supports happen a little bit earlier, just so the supports have got a little bit more comfort. Or we could very well see it, same as last draft, where it falters through, and then we start delving into the Nikos as well.
There's a lot of really powerful bot lanes that just didn't end up getting selected. I'm really thinking of like the Kai'Sa Nautilus duo. The Zyra Khan got banned away in that second phase. So those are all things I have in consideration as like stuff that FPX could potentially play and find some success with. But it seems like they are pretty aware of it as well as being powerful selections. They're actually going to stay on the blue side this time around, ban away that Azir that Scout is very well known for, and some already deviations in terms of how the bans have been set up.
Yeah, I mean, there were triple bans onto Jun in game number one, with the Poppy a notable absence from the FPX ban pool for the time being. Jack's actually also taken away, so in that top side, maybe opening up with a Yorick here for Sheer in the top side. If they might want the Gwen as well. With the Gwen, maybe something to consider for JDG as a ban here. We'll see which one of those it goes to, though. We've got Poppy, we've got Gwen as our two premier picks that we might expect to see taken off the board. I don't know that Poppy B1 gives you the same burst that you're looking for, so I think that FPX has still got a couple of options to cycle through first of all.
Now, Trundle was banned in the last game, so would not be surprised to see that one get locked in early. Has been such a powerful pick in the meta ever since Monkey really brought it to light and halfway through Split 2, but it looks like instead getting some priority on that bottom side. Rude Jacci on the Varus this time, I feel like is a very, very solid option for himself.
Yeah, and I think that taking this early on when you know that this Trundle is probably going to get taken away does make things a little more difficult. The Pill are very good versus these immobile carries, but it's such a premier pick anyway that the Varus getting taken just does make sense. As Jun likely to lock in this Trundle here, and you'd expect to see something get answered with regard to those AD carry picks. You don't want that pool to be pinched even further. I think that Varus is a very good laner in his own right, so maybe something like the Jhin gets taken here to try and match that and enable JDG to go for a little bit of dive as well.
Or it could be a focus towards the top side. With the Sion getting locked in, I feel like there are a lot of counters that Sheer could pick up that could be more on the spicy side. I was going to say, you know, Kindred is something that really was popularized by Milky Way when he was on FPX just a year ago. So it'll be a fun trip down memory lane to see him lock this in again. And he does!
Wow.
Oh, man. We get Milky Way, Platinum Blonde Milky Way at that, playing Kindred. Feels like we're right back into 2024.
Yeah, this is really good, and I like this as a double frontline composition, taking double ADs as FPX. It just makes sense. They've got the Galio for the support as well. The combo between Lamb's Respite and then the Hero's Entrance afterwards is always terrifying to try and play against, because you either walk out of the Lamb's Respite and can be killed, or you get slammed by a Galio and end up getting taunted, knocked up, and then probably die afterwards anyway. This duo synergizes incredibly well together. It also means that getting away from a pillar is a lot easier on the Kindred. You just hop over it, and then that terrain is working against Jun instead of against Milky Way. And I think that for FPX here, they've got themselves a really good opening. It's all about the power level, though, of this Kindred as a champion in itself. Typically pretty weak right now, so it's going to require Milky Way to get to a very powerful stage in the game and start trying to control the jungle as soon as he can.
Yeah, while Jin Zhao does builds damage items, Jin Zhao does do damage. Milky Way on the Kindred, much more of a full carry threat, and already much more of that in this FPX composition through the first rotation than we even saw in Game 1.
So we're looking for FPX, a full front-to-back style of teamfight. They do need probably some sort of engage if they do get off to the races, but JDG's composition goes forward already. Between Trundle and Sion, they are a forward composition, and this rel, if there were any sort of engage support getting locked in, sort of endorses that. So I think that FPX, they can probably double down and hammer home this idea that they want to play disengage. Looking at champions like Renata to be a really good pickup for FPX if they can find a way for Dway to do that. Nico actually has a really good situation here where you can go for disengage and you can just play those Pot Blossoms as a defensive tool. But for JDG, it's about how well they continue to go forward. I love the Jhin and the Sivir from FPX to sort of stymie the efforts that JDG have already put down. But this does give over a good Kai'Sa angle for Pays if he wants it. That's one of those few AD carries that can actually access the backline when you go forward.
And so maybe for Dway, having a little bit of extra engage to make sure that they're not constantly getting engaged into could potentially help them out here. Also a lane counter into the rel. You can use a headbutt to get him out of the crash down. As a Camille lock-in would make a lot of sense, particularly with Sion. Yeah. You add that Camille Galio synergy and you really slice apart this Sion up in the top side.
Yeah, it's a great pairing, right? You find one target, you can also take them down. So this now completely changes and gives flexibility to the FPX composition, where they can act as this disengage comp, where they use Galio as a defensive tool with the Kindred. But equally, if Sheer gets access to Pays to scout, then it's very easy for that access to be enabled and given to Care and to Dway as well. I love the flexibility of this FPX composition, and I think that for JDG, they're going to have to play their style much, much better and out-execute on FPX here, because they are going to struggle when it comes to those pick situations. But I think that in a full 5v5, if they can take a front to back, then they have a chance. But I will say that the disengage tools and everything that FPX have got for themselves really does bode well for FPX here in this second game.
The full front to back for JDG is very powerful. If you're able to set those battle lines up, allow for Pays to really get rolling on the back line alongside Scout on this Aurora, this JDG comp will get very powerful, especially as the game goes on. However, FPX, so many point and click, easy go buttons, easy to execute composition. I feel like that could definitely help them, especially in these first 15 to 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very high on this FPX comp. I think that JDG have got a little bit more of a difficult challenge for themselves, but I think that a lot of this is going to come down to Jun. It's going to come down to Milky Way and those two junglers, right? This is a pocket pick Kindred for Milky Way, a pick that he's played so frequently, so many times before, and made his name for on this champion, up against Jun, who's been such a premier carry jungler on this Trundle, who can early on try to fight the Kindred.
We are here in Beijing, JDG in their home arena looking to put away a 2-0 over FPX. Okay, are we missing it, or do we have like a protesting crowd or something? What's going on here?
I don't know. Maybe. I honestly have no idea. It's a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is. At the end of the day.
What is going on?
Especially after JDG won game 1 as well. You'd like there to be something there. But either way, you can see Wink going on a little bit of a wander right now, and he's completely unspotted. He doesn't know. Actually, this is really clever. He can get a pick onto Jarchi here, maybe. Just a little bit of a knock-up, and they're going to time this together.
Oh, this is actually really well timed. If Wink can get in here with the second proc of the W, land that stun. Way with the pulverize, hit onto Wink. And another situation, Rude, where FPX's bot lane, you're going to be chunked out to start off the lane.
Yeah, another level 1 where it's actually really, really big for JDG. And, Jarchi, again, finds himself in a position where he's going to be at least out of a health potion or finding himself in a little bit of trouble here in the early stages of this game. So, Hayes going to have a pretty decent time of things. Wink as well, not in a too bad a position. Will highlight to you, though, that it is going to be Jarchi with that lethal tempo and the ghost as well, so opting definitely into this on-hit, attack speed style of Barras and looking to churn through the HP bars of Xiaozu and Jun.
Makes sense considering that front line. Very, very beefy. Adding some of that extra % health is really going to provide a major impact here compared to just lethality builds. So definitely like that for Jarchi. It does mean that maybe the team is a little bit shorter ranged, which can be a bit of a concern as we go throughout this game. But I feel like for FPX, we were talking about the disengage that they have. Also very good engage now that you have Dway on the Alistar, as well as Sheer, who can always just press that Hextech ultimatum on somebody and allow for Care to jump in with the hero's entrance.
Yeah, and I will say as well that the range not necessarily too big an issue if JDG are always walking into you, as Jun is spotted walking in here, but they did also see Milky Way start this red. Has got a smite in a couple of seconds, able to find it. He's going to lose his Raptors for this, but it is going to put Jun a little bit behind on his timings. He's walked all the way from his top side into the bot side of Milky Way. So he's going to come out with a camp advantage, but it's going to take him a while to get there.
Good overall setup by Wink, right? Going and getting that ward down, allowing for Milky Way to generate vision, and then going for that plan to Jarchi. That meant that JDG had the push in the bottom side of the map. And now Milky Way's going to go for an invade of his own.
Yeah, because JDG pushed that first wave, they sacrificed positioning on the next wave, which means that Jarchi and Dway can push that one in. And Milky Way theoretically could have looked for an invade here using his bot lane duo. Not actually going to go for it as he does high roll his mark down on the bot side. Might even transition his way up to that top side to secure a second cap as well, but instead he's just going to take an early reset and feel happy with his position.
Also for Milky Way, because he knows that Shun slowed down on his clear by stealing away the other Raptors, he should have time to reset actually and just jump back up to the top side to take that crab, because Shun now has to go to the Wolves. You'd either have to skip the Wolves and get the crab, or be late to it and allow for Milky Way to pick it up. So he should be controlled by him.
Rectrix early for Milky Way suggests that we're heading into that Kraken Slayer for the first item of the Kindred. No surprises there. Nice little bit of attack speed and attack damage for the Kindred in particular, as Milky Way works his way up to this second crab. Might even go for a cheeky ward early on to spot out where Jun is. Because he waits this little bit of time, he gets a second spawn on the Kindred mark, so already 2-0 on the crabs and 2 up on the marks as well. Really important. And on this bot side, the fact that Jarchi is actually trading this well up against Pays and Wink after the level 1 that we saw as well. This has been no recall situation for FPX. They've not managed to go back to base, reset themselves at all. They are just now finding better laning situations.
Nicely done by the bot lane of FPX. They're actually looking for more even, forcing an ignite out of Wink as Jarchi pops the ghost underneath the tier 1 tower. That power W not gonna find anybody here.
Yeah, they're thinking about it, aren't they? You can see.
I was gonna say that was a very risky move, but you know what? Always nice to put your opponent on your toes, I guess.
Yeah, and they get the ignite out from Wink, and Jarchi gets to move a little bit faster. But there's nothing particularly that actually transpires down there, and I will say that probably a summoner spell advantage for JDG. Corki typically tends to have a pretty decent laning phase, wants to hit that 2-item spike quite early, and from there can fall off a little bit once that range starts to become a pretty big issue. Think about who can Paze hit this game with auto attacks that can't also hit him back. If he's in range to auto attack Care, it means that he can get just as punished. If he's on range to auto attack Milky Way or Jarchi, then the same thing can be said for both of those. They're going to be able to trade back with some autos. But a Drake started up early on for JDG. FPX looking to look at a contest, but are they fast enough to get in?
Milky Way is going to be in the range to go for a bit of a flip, but a teleport has come in as Xiaoshu will be able to join with his ultimate and his flash. Milky Way steals away the dragon, and now JDG are stuck in the bounce downs a little bit. Gene Wills does a lot of damage. Here comes the Choo-Choo train. Not going to knock anybody up. Karen instead finding the Justice Punch on the Paze, but he will get targeted, and Xiaoshu will pick up first blood, join the next target, making it 2-0 on JDG's side.
He's stuck in the pit here. JDG, they need to come and collapse on the Varus. He flashed away from the Scion ulti. Now there are 4 people trying to rout him.
They're waiting for Sheer. Milky Way jumps over the wall. Hook shot comes forward. Nice flash away from Scout to keep him alive. And now Paze is looking on the flank at the 5v3. And JDG are liking those odds very nicely. Wink not landing the stun. Sheer still has his ultimatum available.
TP.
Not putting it on anybody just yet. Another teleport has come in. What a crazy fight we have here in the top side jungle. As Sheer going on to Wink with that Hextech ultimatum. We'll be able to take him down. Xiaoshu in some trouble right now. FPX get 2 kills right back.
And they just trade them back there. JDG very slow to recognize that actually they could pick somebody out from inside the pit, and they're just all a tiz. Don't know whether they're supposed to go for the turret plates, whether they're supposed to go for waves, what they were doing there, they had absolutely no idea. And the fact that Jarchi lives there is incredibly illegal. There's no way that the Varus should ever be able to get out of this situation. But it's a smite from Milky Way that secures the Drake first of all, and you get to see some of the glimpses of what this Galio can do. But the second that Jarchi flashes into the pit, how is he ever allowed to walk back out? Chasing onto Dway, immediately JDG should turn back up to this top side, look for the Varus, but you can see Xiaozu goes to push a wave, Paze walks around the other side, and Jarchi, very heads up, knows that he has to take the fight to this 3-man of JDG. They create this mismatch on the engage, and the fact that Paze has come around this backside means that he's actually putting himself in a 1 versus 3 situation. So Sheer does a very good job at zoning off 3 people, threatening with the Hextech ultimatum so that he knows, actually, I can definitely take down some of you if you step too close to me. And with that being said, it's FPX coming out with the 2 kills on the backside of this that they really shouldn't have gotten.
And Dre shows up to save face a little bit at the end with the Spellbook teleport, but overall a 3v5 that FPX were able to get 2 kills off of, just based off of some, positioning errors from JDG and letting Jachi get out there. Got free, as you mentioned. Just like game number 1, FPX is going to sneak away 1 grub, but JDG will control the rest, as that is a small win on their side of things. However, with FPX getting that first dragon in a much better spot objective-wise than they were the first time around.
Yeah, I think importantly as well, we would give a really good advantage over to FPX in terms of those team fights as well. They're going to be really difficult for JDG to play out, whereas in game number 1 we were saying that FPX's composition does really well at picks, but that team fight is going to be much more difficult for them. Not the instance, though, in this game, as we are seeing some of those swaps come through. Jarchi, level 6 on the Varus now, feeling very confident to step up to Paze, and just ripping a Chain of Corruption. There's no Valkyrie on the Corki right now, so you could just look to try and chunk him out, get a little bit of control established over that mid lane wave.
Force to cleanse. Paze at level 6 of his own. Slow things down just a little bit. Take a quick stock of where things are at. Milky Way on his signature Kindred, a slight advantage over Shun. That is the largest CS discrepancy that you see right now on your screen. He works towards his first item. Also has those first 2 stacks. Has not been able to get any more. Again, you want that 4th to really have the high impact, get that additional range. Milky Way looking to get his way closer to that, but Shun and JDG doing a nice job to make sure those camps are not able to be stolen away.
And it's been a while here, Great, since we've seen a Kindred. For those unfamiliar or those who forget, they may know that number 4 is the big ticket marker, but every stack that Kindred gets, he gets a little bit more power on his E. But at the first 4 stacks, and once he reaches number 4, he increases his range from 525 at base to 575, and then every 3 stacks after that, so 7, 10, maybe 13 in solo queue, you get 25 range afterwards. So theoretically, this infinitely scaling champion, but you really want to hit 4 stacks first so that you can start playing at slightly longer ranges and making a pretty decent output on the fight, as Xiaozu has got ulti. Just going to quickly pop that and should be absolutely fine to make his way out to safety. But it's really good for Milky Way, who's actually taken a bit of a pit stop in his build path, and maybe looking for something a little bit different with the serrated Dirk to try and cut through some of those squishier members.
What could possibly be Edge of Night or Yom? Like,
I think he's just building 2 items at once and decided, I want a Dirk. Thank you.
if you're a Kindred main, let us know in the chat what this is, as I don't know. Collector first item. I know that generally that's a popular one here. More skirmishing here in the mid lane. Drag it up in 5 seconds. FPX doing a nice job to regain control of the mid lane wave. Milky Way here first on the play. Teleport coming in as well from Care to the bot side. Here has his as well. As FPX getting off to a 2-dragon lead would be a very good situation for them.
They did that in game number 1 as well. Poke from Pei is actually starting to stick on to Jarchi, who's got the 2 non-sustained components of a Blade of the Ruin King. So no Vamp Scepter just yet means that it'll be a struggle for him to generate that HP back up. But again, positioning around this dragon, it was FPX who found a pretty good posture for the re-engage, but JDG actually, who started out that fight that little bit better. So going to get a recall in for the Varus that was on Vision. Haze and Wink not in a position to particularly contest this, and she can take a nice chunk of HP here as well.
Now that Sheer has Eternity Force, should be a little bit easier to 1v1 this Scion in the side lanes. Really where that matchup becomes very dangerous. We're getting a little bit of skirmishing, and Magnet Storm only knocking in Jue. So not the craziest situation to use that ulti on the Rel.
Yeah. Especially when you've got 2 AD carries that you might want to try to focus as well.
Yep.
Magnet Storming and Alistair does feel a little bit suboptimal.
Now Jue has his ulti, but did not. It's an advantage that FPX should take. However, Scout dishing out a big chunk onto the cow before he can use that Unbreakable Will. That'll be very important if they do decide to contest this major objective. Milky Way starting the dragon up, hoggling it just a little bit, but the vision is played beautifully here by FPX. They've caught out Wink, used the crash step, but the between wounds from Scout is big, and it forces the lands respite out for Milky Way. Teleport coming in, Sheer gonna join the party first, but the health bars are so low on FPX's side, and Pays is gonna flash forward and try to rip apart FPX again. Milky Way and Jachi force the flash out as Wink is still somehow alive. Xiaoshu comes in, takes the Kindred out, and Jachi is next on the menu. It's gonna be the inevitable kill going over to Pays, and Shun going forward onto Sheer and Care as well. JD Gaming get 3 kills for free.
We just said that focusing the support was a bad idea, and FPX fall right into the exact same trap. They commit everything onto Wink, who's able to use the Ferromancy Shield as well as Flash to get out to safety. It then leaves FPX stranded in Narnia with JDG with complete ingress onto their 3-man. Yes, they're saved in the Lamb's Respite, but it's very little respite for them as they commit so heavily onto one side of the map. They funnel themselves into this very tight choke. They allow for Scout to get so much DPS on for free. There's a pillar slowing them the whole time, and by the time Sheer makes it here, you know, the fight's pretty much already over because Pays is 1v3 flashing into the backline of FPX. And you Camille Galio, they're not at that critical mass stage yet where they just one-shot whoever they ulti. Just one item between, or one item apiece. It's not going to be enough to get that done.
And what looked like a good start for FPX, burning a crucial cooldown off of Wink, picking him off with Death Brush, ends up being a 3-for-0 against them as JDG generating a 2,000 gold lead for themselves right as the Rift Herald now should spawn. Very crucially as well, JDG able to get that first dragon of their own, making sure that there is no soul stacking possible for Fun plus Phoenix, who now have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. That last setup did not work in their favor.
And again, right, a reminder as to the key players that we were talking about coming into this series that we wanted to see more from. Scout, on this JDG roster in the first opening series has been subpar, not at the same level that we expect to see from one of our all-pro ballots from split number 2. But in game 1 on the Orianna had a standout performance with some massive team fights. The same to be said for Scout here in this game number 2. So far, 1 team fight down, he looked incredible in it. And yes, he's down a little bit of experience, but his input to the game so far in just that 1 fight alone has looked very impressive.
If we can see this Scout moving forward, that's going to be a big thing for JDG. The inconsistencies of this player, one of the greatest LPL players of all time, have resulted in JD Gaming not looking as strong as they might have expected all year long. But now, Scout's going to look to try to carry this one here for his team. As the Unstoppable Onslaught comes in from Xiaoshu to join his team around that Rift Herald. They should be able to take it down, but FPX look like they want to fight this one out. The Unbreakable Will already burned here by Jue.
Flanking Sheer.
Looking for a big flank. He used the Blast Cone to get over. No! He misses the hook shot, and there's no engage whatsoever on his side, but a 2-man knockback comes through from Jue, and he'll be able to take Wink down at the very least. Could have been even worse for JDG if Sheer landed that combo.
Yeah. Missing stationary targets is one thing. Missing walls that haven't moved for 15 years, that's another. Sheer, though, he might be in a little bit of trouble here as he walks back to top side, but actually fancy beats his way away from some Aurora spells, but Jun is still here.
Popping the shield, actually going to go aggressive, knowing that the hero's entrance is available. There's that Camille Galio combo. It's going to knock up Sean, but Scout one-shots the Camille, and now turns it into an even numbers fight in Milky Way. And Care don't necessarily like that, with Pays and Wink on the way as well. Justice Punch going to get cancelled. Scout takes another kill, and JDG picked 2 more.
Okay, that looks rough for FPX, I'm going to be honest. As Sheer goes forward, he misses instead of missing the wall, this time he misses the target, so he doesn't get that attack speed steroid, and it means that Shun's able to barely keep himself alive. The Subjugate working overtime, providing some extra stats and making sure that he's actually alive. And then the re-engage coming through, right? You've got just Pillar wailing away on you this whole time. And then the engage attempt from Care, not quite enough. Milky Way really not in the position to do the damage either. And from a fight where we were thinking, oh, you know, it's just a little bit like they've focused the wrong target. This time they, you know, focus a feasible target but completely misexecute.
Oh man, that was a tough sequence from one of our most promising top laners that we have in the league here. Milky Way was on vision. I mean, the thought is you can play this 2v1 because you know the Camille Galio is here, but Sheer just not able to find that hook shot, and that was the start of a disaster here for FPX.
Yeah, I mean, the Subjugate does a lot of work in terms of taking damage onto Sheer in the first place, and then Scout just realizes, oh, hold on, I can one-shot this Camille very easily, actually, and I don't think that they'll expect it, and you know, they're exactly right with it. Yes, you've got this 2 versus 1 situation, which you know is actually going to turn into a Kindred and a Galio turning up. But also, I will say, Wink and Pays got there fast as well. Jiaqi Jue were not a part of that, so numbers actually ended up favouring JDG in this skirmish. They're going to look to use that to take this mid lane tier 1 turret. We're 20 seconds away from a Cloud Dragon, so that's the next logical sequence for JDG. They will put down that Herald and hopefully look to establish more control over this bot side. And you can see already on the minimap, FPX have completely scattered away from that Dragon. They know that it's not something that they can contest. And now it's about Xiaozu. I think that one of his difficulties so far has been recognizing when he's the play on the map, when he needs to take a back seat. Hopefully he can recognize that when this Drake starts to get focused, that he's the one who's potentially under fire.
FPX want to turn back towards the Dragon, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen as Milky Way is
There's
now
a mark.
clearing out
There's
the
a mark top side. Can't go to the Drake grapes.
And Milky Way has gotten to number 4, whether it was off of counter jungling or whatnot. So that is a win here for Milky Way. Going to get number 5 in terms of the stack department, so that increased range, as you mentioned, and just a little bit of those added stats. Going to come at the cost, though, of JDG getting the 3rd Dragon of the game.
So we just take a little bit of a pause here, not expecting too many things to happen for the next minute or so with Atakan spawning down on that bot side in 20 seconds. I don't think that FPX need to be completely disheartened for this game. I do think that their composition can still thrive, right? You've got Milky Way who's working on building out a decent advantage. in the jungle role, with 400 gold being relatively inconsequential when we look at the scale of top lane. But he's picked up the Kraken Slayer. He's working towards that Collector as second item. And once those two do hit, your front-to-back nature of this composition should still be very, very powerful if you can execute on it properly.
I don't really know how Xiaoshu got that fed. I mean, Sheer was getting a couple of kills. 2,000 gold lead. That's crazy. This is a matchup that is not supposed to go good for the Sion, by the way.
You're a Sion player, right? Tell me the Sion Camille matchup.
I dislike this matchup, but maybe this is just an eye-opening experience that I am bad at League of Legends. Not that I didn't know that already, but...
Even still, I mean, theoretically, Camille versus tanks, you'd expect the Camille to do well as you get past that first item marker, so...
Yeah. To give myself credit, this matchup was way worse when Divine Sunder was still in the game. Now that it's Triforce still as the focus, you don't get that extra healing just yet. So maybe a small pass for Sheer, but still being 2 levels down, 30 CS down, 2,000 gold down at a matchup that you picked yourself into, not very acceptable at this point.
No, it's not, and that is a little bit indicative almost of his gameplay as well in this game in particular. A couple of really awkward skill shots being thrown out as JDG do start up this Atacon. They've done all the legwork, they've set up the vision, they've made it so FPX are going to have to face check this pretty dangerously, as now looking for Care.
The pillar cancelled the Justice Punch and forced Care to flash away. The Otacon will get reset as Xiaoshu's chunked to half HP, so FPX do a decent job of making sure that JD Gaming do not take the objective. It comes at the cost, though, of Sheer's TP.
And Xiaozu's as well, so both top laners just decided to TP in. Nobody wanted to commit too heavily to that. And the issue that JDG have got is that they still have to respect the power that this FPX composition has. If Xiaozu goes headlong into them, with that unstoppable onslaught, first of all, the follow-up from JDG is going to be a little bit delayed anyway. And second of all, that's exactly what FPX's composition wants at this stage. They want people to funnel into them, get caught in the Lamb's Respite, get knocked up by Galio, and then punted away by the Alistair as well. So I think that for FPX, they're getting a little bit of good graces from JDG, because JDG know what the power of this composition is.
I don't know though, Rude. Like, I feel like even if FPX did go for a full 5v5, even with some of those advantageous situations, it would have been so difficult for them to win that one. Just given Shun, very powerful, has to subjugate to just like eat away at one member instantly, and Xiaoshu seemingly unkillable at this point. Yeah,
exactly, right? And I think that's why I'm saying good graces from JDG more than anything. It's like they're giving a lot of respect over where it may honestly not be necessary, and you can see that Sheer as well is indexing more into this team fight playstyle of the Camille. With the Sterak's Gauge being picked up, he's trying to make sure that he can stay in that front line for just a little bit longer, or that he can tank up a little bit more damage for his carries and enable Jarchi, enable Milky Way to come out with some DPS in these team fights, as the Varus now has hit 2 items, so Blade of the Rune King and Ginsu's means he can start to chew through Sion, start to chew through the Trundle as well. If he gets just a little bit of free time left alone, repeated Blight procs can be very powerful and definitely make getting through those high HP targets a little bit easier.
As everybody kind of hits that 2-item spike right at this point, with the Cloud Dragon spawning in 45 seconds. JDG feel like if they can win a fight here, would really give them a good chance to break open this game, especially with Baron spawning in about a minute. They're going to get a good start with Wei flashing away early.
Maybe saves his ulti.
Reset or, not great
importantly. As the Alistair versus Sion in particular, you want to save your ulti so that you can just trade ults with the unstoppable onslaught. Xiaozu goes in, you tank it, you body block it, and then you can try and play the fight out after that. But Xiaozu is massively tanky at this stage. He's got 3 levels on Jarchi, 2 levels on Milky Way. JDG just playing with FPX right now while Scout's getting free farm in the top side. Has got teleport so he can join whenever, and FPX are the ones that are really burdened to make something happen here. Yes, they're getting a push in on the mid wave, but they're losing out big time on gold in top lane, gold through this bot side as well, getting choked out and experience shared. As JDG, they've stalled for long enough that there's another dragon up, and I think that's the much lower stakes objective for them to try and start here.
JDG had any intention of trying to take that Otacon. It was just to make sure FPX stayed in a disadvantageous position, but now it's Pays that could be in a bad position himself. He gets ultimatum by Sheer, instantly taken down by Jachi, and now Joy with a 3-man pulverize as well. This is the fight that FPX could win. It's already a double kill picked up here for Milky Way, and they're looking for more, but Scout able to clean things up on the backside, taking Sheer down. Jachi still at half HP. It's 2 members on JDG live, but the rest of FPX should be able to claim this dragon.
And that's what this comp does, Grapes. They find one target, they kill one target. It's a great pick from Care to start it all off. And Sheer this time manages to execute on the Camille combo. He flashes onto Pays, gives him no room to escape. And yes, on the Corki, you can flash, you can cleanse, but the second the Camille gets that ulti onto you, you get followed up on by the Hextech ultimatum, by the hero's entrance, and there's just nothing that you can do. Care constantly playing in this pocket. I mean, really, they should have known. They saw him through mid lane, and I think Pays just with a little bit of complacency here.
And you know what? Stalling on the Otacon's big, but mid prio, always the most important. It'll have to care to get into that bush, and that was the start of a really big team fight win here for this team.
Chain of Corruption as well, spreading through the backline. Then we got to see Jiaozu Jiachi rather get some really high value from the Varus pick. He goes back to base and picks up double components of the Terminus as well. So now this Varus is really fed, and you know, I said it for a reason that FPX don't necessarily need to be worried about the way this game's going. They've still got time in this game to make something happen because their comp will always function like that. Somebody will always die, and the drawback of having this triple frontline 2-carry composition is that actually, if one of your carries goes down, you're then relying exclusively on Scout.
And now FPX kind of have advantages in their marksman positions, and that makes JDG a little bit nervous. They're actually forcing a fight by starting up the Baron Nashor at 27 minutes. They're going to get a teleport in from Sheer. As the Baron's already at half HP, a big pillar comes through from Shun. It slows down some of the FPX members. Baron has been reset, mid lane prio generated, but now Xiaoxi comes in with the unstoppable onslaught. Jui jumping in after popping the unbreakable will, and they're going to instantly try to burst down Wink. The rail is down, but the Between Worlds lands on 3 targets. Sheer gets knocked back with the pillar, but a flash forward comes in from Care. He forces Pays back, but now Pays is going to be able to dish out some more damage, and Shun is still unkillable on the front line. Care goes down to 3-for-1 overall, and JDG are looking for more. Jachi gets pillared. Jachi gets taken very, very low. The Lamb's Respite not going to save him for much longer. It'll at least get him 1 kill back, and now Milky Way is stuck in a 1v3, but Jiaoqi's looking to chase him down. The Q not going to connect, but Scout will jump to the wall to finish it off. It's an ace for JD Gaming.
And another fight that JDG seemed to claw out from the victory where they had previously found defeat. They're going to break open the base with that mid push and then turn right back towards that Baron. Jun not going to be alive, but they're going to have the HP advantage from Wink. And, you know, I say that, they're actually all recalling. So Baron not on the cards for them. I think they spent a little bit too long maybe chasing, or just don't think they've got it in there. But this fight looks really good for FPX, right? Like, this is Wink getting one shot very early on. Chain of Corruption roots up the rel and they get taken down instantly. But it's, again, this desynced nature of FPX where it's a flash taunt in from Care, but there's no follow-up from the carries and a double knock-up as well. And actually, just Sion being Sion. Jiachi and Milky Way are pretty much free-firing for the majority of that time. But the power of this front line is just a little too high for the FPX carries at this stage in the game.
And another instance of FPX playing very fast and very loose, and maybe that coming back to bite them. Take a look at the bottom of your screen. Camille Galio had both their ultimates up. They did not utilize that combo in the way that they drafted for in this situation. And that meant that JDG were able to keep their backline members alive. Pays staying very healthy through the majority of that, despite being the initial target. And that means that FPX unable to win that one, now falling back down to about 4,000 gold behind and having to face check around this topside river, knowing that Baron can always be a threat.
And just take a look at Pays' inventory. He knows the only way he dies is if he gets hit by Camille ulti. Well, guess what? The next time that happens, I've got a go golden button to make sure that I don't end up falling. Corki's AP ratios exist. They're garbage, but they exist. Yeah. This is exclusively to punish FPX for their one-track minded composition.
We'll see if it works out, as he will be a much more difficult player to target. Both him and Scout both have those Seekers. Means that the backline carries going to be a little bit more disincentivized in terms of going in on if you're FPXs. Baron was peeled away from his mid lane priority being generated by JDG. They'll head right back over after already burning that teleport from Care. That's the win that they wanted. It's in a really tough spot.
Yeah, he's looking for these flank angles, but it's all about whether or not he gets spotted, and he's constantly playing this tug-of-war game where he has to make sure that he doesn't give away his position, but also doesn't end up being too far away from the rest of his team as well. As you can see, the Varus deep on mid-wave.
Dragon.
Baron's being started, but Jue is 1 HP already.
Whoa!
Dead!
The weirding takes him down combined with the Between Worlds. Jue didn't get a chance to pop anything. He dies with his ulti, his flash, and his heal all up. And already a 45 has been opened up, but here comes Sheer. Will the flank pay off? They land the ultimatum on a scout. He uses